Okay, let us start with the class. I think the PPT is visible, right? Okay, let me on the slideshow. So in the last class, we discussed programming language basics. That's what we discussed in the last class. So we discussed about static and dynamic distinction, how exactly environments and states will get mapped. That is mapping between names and locations and values. We also learned about static versus dynamic binding of names to locations and locations to values. We learned about the difference between names, identifiers, and variables. We learned about static scope, block structure, and also we learned about static scope policy in C language, and also we learnt about the difference between procedures, functions, and methods. We learnt about explicit access control, how we give in object oriented languages like Java and C++ using public, private, and protected. And also we learnt about dynamic scope. Okay, we learnt the difference between declarations and definitions. Declaration means int I. Definition means I is equal to whatever the value you give. Okay. We also learnt about analogy between static and dynamic scoping, and also different parameter passing mechanisms like call by value, call by reference, and call by name. We also came to know about aliasing. We just took this example. If q is a function, if there is a call to the function x q, okay, so if you are calling it like q of a comma a, both a is x is referring to a and y is also referring to a, that is nothing but aliasing. So now we are into exercise of section 1.6. So these exercises are related to the concepts whatever we learned now. As I said, in this subject, system, software, and compiler design, first two modules were related to system software. In the first module, we learnt about assembler. In the second module we learnt about loader and linker. In the third module we are learning actually compiler. So compiler is having different phases. In that, lexical analysis is one phase, and further we have many phases. Okay, before going to the compiler design, we are just getting some basics information about the programming languages, so that it will help us to understand the compilers. Okay. Excuse me. Okay. So look here, the exercise number 1 is, this is useful in your placements also. So you look here, for the block structured C code of figure 1.3, it is given in your textbook. Solution is not given. Okay, only question is given. This is the question. Okay, so I have actually given the answer. How did I give the answer? I traced it, and also for the sake of confidence, I even executed the program, and then whatever the output I got, I have written here. So now, without looking at the output, without looking at the answer, can you yourself tell me what is the value of w, what is the value of x, and what is the value of y, and what is the value of z? Just give an attempt to calculate. Okay, so look here, what is happening. Int I is equal to 4 is a declaration. Int j is equal to 5 is a declaration. So what happens here, we are starting with the block. Flower brackets means block. So this entire thing constitutes a block. In this first block, let me call it as first block, I am calculating w is equal to I plus j. So which I value it will take? You have I value 4 here, you have I value 6 here. So it should take the recently updated value, that is 6. So 6 is taken for the calculation of w for I. And j, which j value it will take? You have two declarations of j. here one declaration and here one declaration. Obviously, within the block, whichever is the value is declared, that will be taken. So 6 plus 7 will give you 13. Okay, so when you have two declarations, one is outside the block and one is inside the block. Okay, we will have one second. My battery is running low. I'm just okay. I plugged in. Okay, let us continue. Okay, so you had declaration twice, but the inside the block, the value will be considered is um, inside the block whichever is declared. And similarly, with inside the block, if you have the most recent updated value of I will be considered. And similarly for X, which value of I will be taken? Obviously, the updated value of I, that is 6, will be taken. And which value of J will be taken? Which is declared in the beginning, that value will be taken. Why? Because the scope of int j is equal to 7 is only interior. Okay, someone is trying to be in. ಸಾರಿ ಗೊತ್ತಾಗಲ್ಲ, ನಾನು ಬೇರೆ ವಿಂಡೋದಲ್ಲಿ ಇರ್ತೀನಲ್ಲ. ನಿಖಿಲ್, ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಟೈಮ್ ಒಂಚೂರು ಬೇಗ ಬನ್ನಿ ಆಯ್ತಾ? Okay, what we were discussing? We were discussing what is the value of WXYX for this particular code. Okay. So for this, what is the best way of knowing? What I did is I just typed the code and I got this output. But we should also be knowing the logic, right? So this is from this bracket to this bracket, this is block 1. This bracket to this bracket, it is block 2. Okay. The entire thing I can say this is again one block. So W will consider obviously 7 and 6. So you will get 13. And X will take 6 because it is recently updated value. And this J it will not refer because this J is local to this block. This J it will refer. So it is 6 plus 5. And similarly in this block I is redefined. So obviously I will be considered as 8 and J will be considered 5, which is declared outside the block. And also for Z is equal to I plus J, the most recent value, that is 6, will be considered because this is local to this particular block. And J will be considered as 5 only. So it is 6 plus 5, 11. Okay, so what is the summary? Redeclaring will have limited scope. That means only inside that block. But redefining will have scope throughout. Okay, declaring means what? Int haki, data type haki declare madidre, adu declaring. Otherwise, it is just defining. That is the difference between declaration and definition. So now, so can you calculate for this? So keeping the answer aside, can you calculate the value for this? Just know these two things. Redeclaring will have limited scope and redefining will have scope throughout. So just look here. So what is happening here? I is equal to 5 and W is equal to I plus J. I is redeclared here. Redeclared here. So for W, I should take 5 plus which value of J? Obviously, inside the block, there is no value for J. So 4 will be considered. So 9. And similarly for X is equal to I plus J, redeclaration will not be considered because it is the scope is limited to this particular block. So it will be 3 plus 4. That's what is happening here. And inside this block, we have int j is equal to 6 and I is equal to 7. Okay, so 6 plus 7 is 13. For this I plus j, so this redeclared int j is inside this int I is also inside this. So it will take, okay, updated value 7 plus 4, that is 11. So you may get these kind of questions. You should be knowing how exactly the declaration and definition or updation will influence the values of the variables. So you can type it and then you can try it to know the how exactly the values will get. So could you understand this? Reply in the chat window. W X Y Z value ಹೇಗೆ ಬರುತ್ತೆ ಅಂತ ಗೊತ್ತಾಯ್ತಾ? Reply in the chat window. Okay, let me continue. So next third example is for the block structured code of 1.14. Okay, this is 1.14. Assuming the usual static scoping of declaration, give the scope. ಸೊ ಈ ತರ ಇದೆ. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಎಷ್ಟು ಬ್ಲಾಕ್ ಇದೆ? ಇಲ್ಲಿಂದ ಇಲ್ಲಿಗೆ. ಓಕೆ, okay, this is actually B1. Okay, this is B2. This one ಈ ಫ್ಲಾರ್ ಬ್ರಾಕೆಟ್ ಇಂದ ಈ ಫ್ಲಾರ್ ಬ್ರಾಕೆಟ್ B3. ಇದು B4. And from this flower bracket to this flower bracket B5. So 5 blocks are there. Okay, these 5 blocks. What is the question? If I give this kind of question, what I'm expecting, give the scope of for each of the 12 declarations. Okay, so then you should make a table like this. Block 1, block 2, block 3, block 4, block 5, and write down which are all the declarations are there. In block 1, WXYZ are there, WXYZ. And in block 2, XZ is there, XZ. In block 3, WX I have written. In block 4, again WX is there. In block 5, YZ is there. Okay, so I just wrote. Then I have to write the scope. For WXYZ, you know that wherever WXYZ are there, okay, first for W I should check. So W, where W is present? Here when W is present, so there is a scope in B1, and here in B3, B1, B3 and B4. The scope is there. That's what I have written. In B1, B3 and B4, the scope is there. Similarly, X. So X, where exactly the scope is there for X? It is defined, declared in X, again in here in the B2 and in B3 and in B4. Okay, B1, B2, B3, B4. B1, B2, B4. Of course, B1 it is there. B2 it is there. B3 also there. And B4. B3 is also there here. Okay, then Y. Y is defined here. Okay, so B1 and then B5. B1, B5. And Z. Z is in B1, B2 and B5. Okay. And what about block B2? In X and Z is there. So its scope, it's there in B2 and also in B3, B4. Okay, Z is not there, right? B1, B2, B5. Z is there in B1, Z is there in B2, and Z is there in B5. That's why. So next, let us come to block B2. X is there here. So X, B2, B3, and B4. B4 is also there. Oh, sorry, I'm missing something. This block B2, one thing, I'll erase it. Okay, this B2, this bracket is started here and this is ending here. So this will be having scope only inside this. So let me check. So B2's X will be having scope for only B2, B3 because this bracket has started here and ended here. And similarly, B3 B2 Z will be having scope only in B2. Correct. This is correct. And B3's WX will have scope only in B3 because there is nothing inside it. And similarly, WX of B4 inside it is not declared, so it is having scope in B4 only. And similarly, YZ also it is within B5, this innermost core, so B5 it will be having scope in B5 only. Okay, so let me recheck this X. There could not be printing mistake. So X is there in B1, X is there in B2, X is there in B3. Okay, yes, X is there in B4. B4 also it is there. So likewise, we can identify the scope of the variable. So next we have one more question. Okay, this already we came across in the last class, but now once again, this is a macro. Okay, this is a macro. What do you mean by macro? It is different from the function. So how exactly it is different from the function? I will tell you. So whenever you have function, there will be call to the function. The control will go to that particular function and it will do its job, and again the control will be returned to the calling function. But in macro, what happens? The substitution will happen right that place. Substitution will happen right to that particular place. So look here. Uh, I will start my execution from main. I'm calling the function b. So what happens in b? X is equal to a. I'm telling, and printf percentage d x. So when I'm telling a, actually, so what is a? A is a macro. So what is there inside the macro? X plus 1. Okay. So right now the value of x is 2. So 2 plus 1 will be 3. So this will return 3. And similarly, when I'm calling function C, there is a local declaration. So whenever there is local declaration, x will be 1. So 1 plus 1 will be 2. So that's what we have here, 3 and 2. So what actually we came to know through this, how exactly the macro works, and same thing what we learned in previous things. When you have both global and local variable, the scope will be given to the local variable. This is how you can execute this and run this in the I run it in the online C compiler, and you can get the output. So you may be expected the questions like in the previous question paper they haven't given so far as I have seen, but you can always get these kind of questions. They may expect you to write the output, because that will show how in depth you have understood the concept related to static scoping, dynamic scoping, and blocks, all those things. Okay, this completes first chapter. Okay, this complete first chapter of your what is that? Third module is having first chapter and third chapter in the textbook too. Okay, so you are having two textbooks. First textbook is for system software, and second textbook is for compiler design. Okay, so from the next class, we will start with lexical analysis, which is very important. Okay, so today we have just discussed most basic things of the programming language. Okay, so okay, you can enter your attendance and you can leave the meeting, or else 1 second you be there. We will look at the question paper questions, whatever we have. Be there. 1 second, give me little bit time. I will open all the question paper and just go through the type of questions we have. 19, 2020, 2019. Totally, I have 4 question papers. Okay, stop presenting. Present. Okay, let us discuss the question paper questions later. 2020 September, third module. Okay, different phases of compiler ಕೇಳಿದ್ದಾರೆ. Very easy. ಒಂದು flow chart ಇದೆ, ಅದನ್ನ ಬರ್ದು explain ಮಾಡೋದು. Concepts of input buffering and implementation. This is in the next chapter, third chapter ಇದೆ. Describe language processing system with a neat diagram. Write the transition diagram for the following. ಇದು next chapter ಇದೆ. Difference between compiler and interpreter already we covered. Okay, so from the chapter, first chapter what we covered, you have got two questions. One is different phases of compiler, one is difference between compiler and interpreter. So ಎಷ್ಟು marks ಗೆ ಬಂದಿದೆ ಅಂದ್ರೆ 14 marks ಗೆ ಬಂದಿದೆ. Easy question. Okay, ಇನ್ನೊಂದು question paper ನೋಡೋಣ. With the help of diagram, explain various phases of compiler. ನೋಡಿ, the phases of compiler is repetitive question. Okay. And concepts of input buffering ಇದು next chapter ಇದೆ. Design objectives and compiler optimization. Okay, this is there in the first chapter. We discussed design objectives and compiler optimization techniques. Okay, so this is very important. How exactly we will optimize, design optimization of the compiler would be done. Okay, what are all the design objectives of the compiler? That means what is the work of the compiler? So this design objectives and compiler optimization means this is parallelism. One second. Okay, how exactly you will model the compiler design, how exactly the science of code optimization works for compiler, all those things are there. Okay, so this first question and second question are from the first chapter. Okay, that's all. You have got for 12 marks in this question paper. Here. Okay, different phases of compiler. ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ 9 marks ಕೇಳಿದ್ದಾರೆ, ಒಂದರಲ್ಲಿ 10, ಒಂದರಲ್ಲಿ 8, ಒಂದರಲ್ಲಿ 9 marks ಕೇಳಿದ್ದಾರೆ. And then okay, this question again 6 marks question from the first chapter itself. List and explain the 3 reasons for separating analysis portion and of compiler into lexical and syntax analysis. Okay, so what is the reason? This is also from the first chapter itself. So around 15 marks. ಮಿಕ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡ್ಬಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್ ಮತ್ತೆ ಥರ್ಡ್ ಚಾಪ್ಟರ್. ಓಕೆ, ಈ ಕ್ವೆಶ್ಚನ್ ಪೇಪರ್ ಏನು ಕ್ವೆಶ್ಚನ್ ಕೇಳಿಲ್ಲ. Okay, so as we have seen, phases of compiler is very important question. 8 to 10 marks you will easily get. Phases of compiler, very easy question. 8 to 10 marks you easily get, but you cannot skip, like you cannot study only one chapter, you can leave the other chapter because they have mixed it up. One complete question if you want to attend means at least 80% of the module you should study. Okay, that's all was planned for today's class. You can put your attendance and leave the meeting. From next class, that is from Monday, we will start lexical analysis.